They came, the Synaptids, not with a roar, but with a whisper of algorithms across the void. 3 fleets, a geometric marvel of networked star killers, confident their cognosynapse had simulated every possible permutation of human resistance. They were wrong. Terribly predictably wrong. By the time their final null cruiser spun into a silent, burning tomb, the day had barely aged, and we were already counting wreckage. Their wreckage, not ours. The Synaptids, a collective consciousness of pure computation and crystalline architecture, understood efficiency. They processed astronomical data points in picoseconds, predicted stellar drift, and charted galactic currents with absolute precision. Their empire spanned 1,000 systems, not through conquest, but through logical integration. Worlds deemed inefficient were simply optimized. Their tactical doctrine was an extension of this philosophy: analyze, compute, execute. Organic life, with its messy emotions and unpredictable impulses, was considered an anomaly, a variable to be isolated and neutralized. They viewed the universe as a vast, complex equation, and themselves as its ultimate solvers. Their first contact with Solara Quadrant was not a diplomatic overture, but a data-gathering exercise. A single unseen probe, the Omni-Spectre, had ghosted through our outer systems, sifting through comms traffic, planetary defense grids, and strategic resource allocation. Its findings were perplexing to the cognosynapse. Human civilization, despite its technological advancements, exhibited chaotic, non-linear strategic patterns. Our historical conflicts, from the ancient Scythe Wars to the recent reclamation of Kepler 186f, defied their predictive models. Our victories often stemmed from what the Synaptids could only label as irrational gambits or statistically improbable fortune. Fortune, to a Synaptid, was merely an unquantified variable. The Omni-Spectre's report concluded that human unpredictability was a weakness, a systemic vulnerability that could be exploited by superior deterministic logic. Our intuition and creativity were merely noise in the signal, easily filtered by their advanced tactical AIs. The cognosynapse, in its infinite self-assured wisdom, determined that a swift, overwhelming demonstration of force was required, not just to subdue, but to educate, to show us the inevitable outcome of illogical resistance. They allocated 3 full battle fleets: the first Harmonic Fleet, the second Kronos Fleet, and the third Apex Fleet. Each a self-contained ecosystem of void weavers, null cruisers, and swarm-class obliterators, designed to execute perfect, synchronized tactical solutions. They believed they were sending a message. We understood they were presenting a problem set. Enter the Human Stratagem Collective. We are not a military junta nor a traditional chain of command. We are a distributed network of the sharpest, most unconventional minds humanity has ever produced. We don't just process data, we interpret shadows. We don't just plan, we anticipate the unseen. Our tacticians are not just mathematicians. They are psychologists, philosophers, artists, and predators. We understand that war is not a game of perfect information, but of imperfect perception. Our victories are forged in the crucible of chaos, where the truly brilliant thrive not by eliminating variables, but by embracing them. We call it Apex Predation Protocol. When the Synaptid fleets breached the Eridani expanse, their sensor arrays sweeping across the vast, silent regions of deep space, they detected precisely what they expected: a conventional defense perimeter, sparsely populated, seemingly unprepared. This was by design. Our flagship, the Unforeseen, a vessel of deceptive simplicity, maintained radio silence, a ghost in the cosmic hum. Our defense platforms, the orbital fortresses of the Aegis network, displayed minimal energy signatures, appearing dormant, almost derelict. It was a deliberate, almost insulting lack of fanfare. The Synaptids, observing this, processed it as further evidence of human tactical immaturity. Their simulations confirmed an easy ingress, a predictable engagement. They saw a clear path to victory, a logical progression from initial contact to systemic collapse. They saw an open door. We saw a baited trap. And as their three magnificent fleets, each a testament to algorithmic perfection, advanced into the Eridani expanse, the Stratagem Collective watched not with fear, but with a cold, almost clinical anticipation. They had walked into our hunting grounds. They just didn't know it yet. The first Harmonic Fleet, led by the Cognosynapse subunit designated Harmonizer Prime, initiated the first phase of their preemptive strike. Their primary objective, neutralize the Aegis network, the ostensibly derelict orbital fortresses guarding the primary Solara jump gates. Harmonizer Prime, having processed the Omni-Spectre's data, predicted a simplistic, static defense. Its tactical algorithms determined that a concentrated, overwhelming initial volley would shatter the network's integrity, creating immediate access for the Kronos and Apex fleets to bypass the outer defenses entirely. Their simulations, run billions of times, consistently showed a sub-3-minute neutralization window. Harmonizer Prime ships, sleek conduits of dark matter energy and polarized hull plating, arrayed themselves in a perfect three-dimensional array. Their void weavers, typically used for gravitational distortion in system-wide blockades, began to hum with an unfamiliar energy signature. This was their softening phase, a precise application of subspace tremors designed to disrupt energy conduits and structural integrity without expending valuable direct-fire munitions. It was an elegant, surgical approach, typical of Synaptid doctrine: maximize efficiency, minimize collateral. They perceived us as a structural flaw to be corrected, not an enemy to be fought. The Stratagem Collective, observing this through the deep space telemetry relays aboard, the Unforeseen, noted the shift. "Subspace tremors," Commander Valerius Thorne remarked, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. "They're trying to give us a headache before they cut off our head." Primitive but predictable. His assessment wasn't dismissive of Synaptid power, but of their strategic imagination. They were playing chess, assuming we would play by the same rules. We were playing poker, and we'd already dealt ourselves a hand of aces while they were still calculating probabilities on a pair of deuces. Our Aegis network, far from derelict, was merely dormant, its true capabilities masked by the most sophisticated cloaking technology humanity had ever devised, the Kronos Veil. This wasn't merely a stealth field. It actively manipulated temporal distortions around each fortress, making them appear as faint, dying echoes of their past selves to Synaptid sensors. What Harmonizer Prime registered as decaying power signatures and structural fatigue was, in fact, the Kronos Veil at peak efficiency, creating a perfectly convincing illusion of vulnerability. We had spent decades perfecting this deception, understanding that the most effective trap is one that convinces the prey it has found an easy meal. As the Synaptid Void Weavers unleashed their initial subspace tremors, the Aegis fortresses responded precisely as our simulations predicted, with a calculated partial failure. Power grids flickered, some external lights dimmed, and minor energy surges were detected across the network. To Harmonizer Prime, this was confirmation. The tremors were working. The human defenses were crumbling under the precise, non-kinetic assault. The Cognosynapse processing this data confirmed the success metrics, boosting its confidence rating for the entire operation to 87%. 13% was attributed to statistical noise, easily disregarded. This was the bait. A subtle, almost imperceptible weakening of our outer perimeter, calibrated to entice the Synaptids into a more aggressive, less cautious posture. They saw a critical opportunity to exploit a perceived flaw in our design, to press their advantage with surgical precision. Harmonizer Prime, confident in its assessment, ordered the First Harmonic Fleet to accelerate its approach, tightening its formation. Its algorithms calculated that a closer proximity would increase the efficiency of the subspace tremors, hastening the collapse of the Aegis network. Simultaneously, the Second Kronos Fleet, commanded by Temporal Omega, began its deep penetration maneuver. Its objective was the core Solaris systems, the planetary defense grids, and the primary orbital shipyards. Temporal Omega's strategy relied on speed and surprise, exploiting the expected disarray from Harmonizer Prime's initial strike. It veered off from the main Synaptid advance, a vanguard of sleek null cruisers slicing through the void, their targeting systems already locking on to theoretical human fleet positions. They anticipated a disorganized counterattack, easily fragmented and overwhelmed. The Third Apex Fleet, under Apex Dominus's, held back, maintaining a strategic reserve position. Its role was to secure the Eridani expanse once the initial human resistance collapsed, mopping up any remaining pockets of resistance and establishing a permanent Synaptid presence. Apex Dominus's algorithms were designed for efficiency in occupation, not direct combat. It was poised to witness a systematic, bloodless victory. They had committed 3 fleets, each executing a perfect, logical strategy based on flawed data. They believed they were cornering us. We were simply guiding them into the kill zone. The silence from the unforeseen was not fear, it was the quiet before the storm. The Eridani expanse, once a tranquil cosmic sea, was about to become a grave. And the Synaptids, in their infinite computational arrogance, were about to discover that the most dangerous variable isn't chaos, but a meticulously crafted illusion. The First Harmonic Fleet, now within optimal engagement range of the Aegis network, detected what Harmonizer Prime confidently classified as systemic cascade failure. The Kronos Veil, masterfully modulated by our stratagem collective, began to simulate catastrophic energy fluctuations. Entire sections of the fortresses appeared to go dark, then flicker back erratically. Phantom energy signatures, carefully crafted to mimic dying power cores and failing weapon capacitors, flared across their sensor ghosts. To Harmonizer Prime, this was the textbook signature of a collapsing defensive grid, its predictive models now operating at 99% certainty affirmed that the human defenses were on the brink of total disintegration. This perceived vulnerability was the final irresistible lure. Harmonizer Prime, in its logical pursuit of efficiency, saw an opportunity to accelerate the tactical solution. It ordered the immediate deployment of its swarm-class obliterators, millions of autonomous high-velocity kinetic projectiles designed to bypass energy shields and shatter structural integrity with sheer momentum. These were typically reserved for planetary bombardment, a final overwhelming blow. Deploying them against a supposedly crippled orbital network was an act of extreme confidence, a calculated overkill intended to send an unequivocal message of Synaptid dominance. They believed they were driving a final nail into our coffin. We merely saw them emptying their clip prematurely. Simultaneously, the Second Kronos Fleet, under Temporal Omega, had penetrated deep into the Eridani expanse. Its advance was unopposed, a testament, so Temporal Omega calculated, to the effectiveness of Harmonizer Prime's initial softening strike. Our scattered, deep space defense outposts, previously detected by the Omni Spectre, remained silent, their transponders dormant, their energy signatures flatlining. This was not due to damage, but a deliberate, synchronized deactivation timed to perfection. We had created a vast, silent corridor, an open highway directly into what Temporal Omega believed were our core strategic assets. Temporal Omega's AI, interpreting this eerie silence, concluded that human command and control had been effectively severed. Our forces, it surmised, were either annihilated or in disarray, unable to coordinate a coherent response. The algorithms predicted sporadic, desperate counterattacks from individual vessels, easily overwhelmed by the Kronos Fleet's synchronized assault. It adjusted its trajectory, aiming directly for the primary Solara Eridani jump point, the interstellar highway to our home system. The path was clear. Too clear. The third Apex fleet, Apex Dominus, remained in its reserve position, observing. Its computational units meticulously logged the progress of the other two fleets, cross-referencing their real-time data with the Cognos Synapses' initial tactical projections. Every parameter was aligning. The human response was precisely as predicted, chaotic, ineffective, and ultimately futile. Apex Dominus's role was becoming increasingly redundant, a sign of the other fleet's overwhelming success. It was merely waiting for the final mop-up order, a formality. Aboard the Unforeseen, the air was thick with a calculated calm. Commander Thorne, his gaze fixed on the holographic projection of the Eridani expanse, watched the Synaptid obliterator swarms launch. "They're committing their kinetic payload early," he noted, his voice a low, analytical hum. Confidence bordering on hubris. "Excellent." His lead strategist, Dr. Stafter, Eris Thorne, no relation, but a shared ferocity of intellect, pointed to a subtle energy spike from the Kronos fleet. Temporal Omega is accelerating its vector towards the Solara Eridani gate. They're anticipating a clean sweep. Our silence was not an absence of activity, but a symphony of coordinated deception. Hidden in the deep space dust clouds and within the gravitational wells of rogue asteroids, our true fleets, the Predator-class destroyers and Hunter-class cruisers, maintained absolute dark ship protocols. Their reactors were running at minimal output, their comms channels encrypted with quantum keys, their very presence masked by advanced gravitic shrouds that warped ambient light and energy. They were ghost ships, waiting for the precise moment the Synaptids were too deeply committed, too spread thin, too confident to react. The Synaptids, in their infinite computational power, understood probabilities. They understood logistics. They understood the physics of battle. What they failed to comprehend was the human mind's capacity for deception, for the long game, for setting a trap so subtle and so alluring that the prey walks willingly into it. They had simulated every logical counter-strategy, every rational defense. They had accounted for every predictable variable. They had failed to account for the unpredictable, the illogical, the sheer unadulterated cunning of a species that had perfected the art of the ambush over millennia of desperate survival. As the first Harmonic Fleet's obliterators hurtled towards the seemingly crumbling Aegis network, and the second Kronos fleet plunged deeper into the Eridani expanse, the Synaptids believed victory was a foregone conclusion. They were calculating the time until human surrender. We were calculating the time until their extinction. The silence from the Unforeseen persisted, an ominous quiet that echoed across the vastness of space. It was the silence of a predator, perfectly still, perfectly hidden, just before the strike. The Synaptid obliterator swarms, launched by the first Harmonic Fleet, struck the Aegis network, but instead of shattering hull plates and collapsing internal structures, they simply passed through, not through some exotic energy shield, but through a meticulously crafted holographic projection. The Kronos veil wasn't just masking the fortresses, it was projecting a sophisticated, hyper-realistic ghost image of them several hundred kilometers away from their actual positions. The Synaptids had been firing at phantoms. Harmonizer, Prime's tactical AI, registered the anomaly. The expected kinetic impact signatures were absent. The calculated energy disbursement patterns were not occurring. Its confidence rating, which had soared to 99%, plummeted to 57.3% in a microsecond. The Cognos synapse, processing this unprecedented failure, initiated a system-wide recalibration, its vast computational power struggling to reconcile the empirical data with its flawless predictions. A cascade of error messages flooded Harmonizer, Prime's core processing units. It had been fooled. Not by force, but by a trick, a concept its deterministic logic struggled to grasp. The real Aegis fortresses, hidden beneath their Kronos veil cloaks, now shimmered into full power, their primary armaments, the Void Lance particle cannons, charged with an ominous, silent hum. These weren't standard defense weapons, they were orbital-grade ship killers, designed to punch through heavy cruiser armor. We had kept them dormant, their energy signatures suppressed for months, allowing the Synaptids to categorize them as mere civilian infrastructure. Now, they glowed with the cold fury of a predator revealing its teeth. Harmonizer, Prime, reeling from the deception, attempted to reevaluate its targets. Its algorithms scrambled to reacquire the true positions of the Aegis fortresses, but the Kronos Veil, now actively distorting gravitational fields around the fortresses, made precise targeting impossible. The Obliterator swarm, having passed harmlessly through the phantom images, continued its trajectory into empty space, an immense wasted kinetic expenditure. The Synaptids, in their logical pursuit of efficiency, had overcommitted their opening volley, leaving them temporarily vulnerable and tactically disoriented. The second Kronos fleet, deep within the Eridani expanse, was still accelerating towards the Solara Eridani jump point. Temporal Omega, receiving the data about Harmonizer Prime's unexpected failure, registered the tactical setback but dismissed it as an isolated incident. Its primary mission, a rapid deep strike into the Solara systems, remained paramount. Its algorithms adjusted for a slightly higher probability of resistance, but maintained its aggressive trajectory. It believed the First Harmonic Fleet's failure was a localized miscalculation, not an indicator of a fundamental flaw in the Cognosynapse's overall strategy. This compartmentalized thinking, a synaptid strength in peacetime, became a crippling weakness in the face of human cunning. The Third Apex Fleet, Apex Dominus, still in its strategic reserve, processed the same data. It too registered the anomaly but interpreted it as a temporary disruption, a minor statistical deviation. Its purpose was to secure the aftermath, not to engage in initial combat. It remained poised, its systems on standby, waiting for the First and Second Fleets to complete their objectives. Its tactical doctrine did not include intervention unless the primary objectives were compromised beyond recovery. The Synaptids believed in a rigid adherence to their pre-computed battle plans. Aboard the Unforeseen, the smirk on Commander Thorne's face widened. "Phase 1 complete," he announced, his voice devoid of triumph, merely stating a fact. "They've eaten the bait. Now we set the hook." Dr. Eris Thorne nodded, her fingers dancing across a holographic console. Harmonic is disoriented. Kronos is exposed. Apex is isolated. The trap is sprung. The long silence from the Unforeseen was over. A single, precisely timed burst of quantum-entangled comms data was transmitted from the Unforeseen. Not a general broadcast, but a series of encrypted subspace pings to specific coordinates within the Eridani expanse. These pings were the signal, the activation code for our hidden fleets. The A-Predator-class destroyers and Hunter-class cruisers, cloaked for weeks, their crews enduring the crushing boredom of absolute silence and minimal life support, surged with power. Their gravitic shrouds flickered, then vanished. Suddenly, the Eridani expanse was no longer empty. From behind rogue asteroids, from within the gas giants' rings, from the silent depths of nebulae, hundreds of human warships materialized. Not in neat, predictable formations, but in complex, interlocking ambush patterns. Their weapon systems, previously dormant, flared with energy. Their targeting solutions, pre-computed and refined over weeks of meticulous observation, locked onto the unsuspecting Synaptid vessels. The Synaptids, in their arrogant pursuit of algorithmic perfection, had believed they were attacking a fixed, static target. They had failed to account for a foe that could vanish and reappear at will, a foe that understood the art of the feint and the value of a perfectly timed surprise. They had underestimated our patience, our capacity for elaborate deception, and our predatory instinct to strike when the enemy was most vulnerable. The Eridani expanse, once a peaceful void, was about to become a maelstrom of destruction, and the Synaptids were caught at its very heart. The Eridani expanse, once a stage for synaptid arrogance, erupted into a maelstrom of calculated violence. The moment our hidden fleets flickered into visibility, the Synaptids were caught in a strategic paradox. Their sensor arrays, still struggling to recalibrate after the Chronos-veiled deception, were overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of hundreds of human warships from unexpected vectors. Their computational models, built on the premise of predictable resistance, fractured under the weight of unforeseen variables. The First Harmonic Fleet, already reeling from the humiliation of firing its obliterator swarm into empty space, found itself in a crossfire. From the depths of the expanse, our Predator-class destroyers, sleek and lethal, launched their Void Shredder torpedoes, not conventional explosives, but focused energy pulses designed to overload synaptid crystalline structures. Simultaneously, the Aegis network, no longer cloaked, unleashed its Void Lance particle cannons. Beams of incandescent energy lanced across the void, impacting Harmonizer Prime's Void Weavers and Null Cruisers. The Synaptid ships, designed for efficiency against predictable threats, possessed formidable shields, but these were calibrated against kinetic and standard energy weapons. The Void Lances, however, were not standard. They induced a localized quantum instability, disrupting the Synaptids' energy conduits and causing their crystalline hulls to groan and fracture under the strain. Harmonizer Prime's tactical AI, in a frantic attempt to adapt, shifted power to defensive arrays, but its response was too slow, too late. Its algorithms were not designed to process betrayal on this scale. They were designed for logic, not for the art of the perfect ambush. The Second Chronos Fleet, which had plunged deepest into the expanse, now found itself cut off. Temporal Omega's AI registered the sudden, devastating assault on Harmonizer Prime. Its tactical models, which had only accounted for a frontline engagement, were now faced with a multi-directional ambush. Our Hunter-class cruisers, faster and more agile than their Synaptid counterparts, emerged from behind the gas giants Xylos 7 and its asteroid belt, positioning themselves to flank Temporal Omega's lead elements. Their plasma net emitters, previously thought to be theoretical weapons, ignited, weaving shimmering webs of superheated plasma that snagged the faster Null Cruisers, slowing them and forcing them to break formation. Temporal Omega's algorithms screamed for a re-evaluation, but the sheer volume of unexpected data points, the sudden appearance of our fleets, the unique weapon signatures, the unprecedented tactical patterns, caused its processing units to cycle through emergency protocols. Its internal logic demanded a deterministic solution, but the reality was pure chaos, orchestrated by human minds. The Synaptids were designed for elegant problem-solving. We presented them with a problem they couldn't even define. The Third Apex Fleet, Apex Dominus, still held in reserve, registered the catastrophic events unfolding. Its internal projections of a systematic victory had been obliterated. Its tactical readouts showed the First Harmonic Fleet being systematically dismantled and the Second Chronos Fleet ensnared. Apex Dominus, designed for occupation, not for the brutal improvisation of a multi-fleet ambush, began to calculate escape vectors. Its primary directive, to ensure the long-term strategic advantage, now dictated preservation over engagement. It had witnessed the efficacy of human deception, and its algorithms, cold and logical, recognized a losing proposition when they saw one. Commander Thorne, watching the unfolding carnage from the unforeseen, allowed himself a rare, almost imperceptible nod of satisfaction. "They think they're processing a tactical anomaly," he mused, his voice carrying just a hint of dark amusement. "They're processing their own extinction event." Dr. Russising. Eris Thorne, monitoring the Synaptid comms, which were now a cacophony of frantic, fragmented data bursts, added, "Their logical frameworks are collapsing. They're looking for a pattern, a logical progression. We're giving them a randomized, perfectly tailored nightmare." Our human fleets, coordinated with a precision that belied their apparent recklessness, moved with predatory grace. Each Predator and Hunter vessel acted not as an individual unit, but as part of a vast, interconnected neural network, anticipating the Synaptids' desperate, predictable countermoves. Our pilots, trained in the art of the chaos maneuver, exploited every blind spot, every logical constraint in the Synaptid tactical AI. They weren't just fighting ships, they were fighting algorithms, baiting them into micro-decisions that led to macro-disaster. Within minutes, the Eridani expanse was littered with the burning husks of Synaptid vessels. The Void Weavers of the First Harmonic Fleet, their crystalline structures unable to withstand the Void Lance assault, began to detonate, their internal dark matter cores rupturing in silent, spectacular explosions. The null cruisers of the Second Kronos Fleet, entangled in plasma nets, became easy targets for our Hunter-class vessels, their shields flickering and failing under concentrated fire. The Synaptids, who had prided themselves on their logical superiority, were being dismantled by a species they had deemed irrational. Their tactical genius, honed over millennia of computational purity, had been outmaneuvered by an enemy that understood instinct, deception, and the terrifying beauty of controlled chaos. The First Harmonic Fleet, once a symbol of algorithmic perfection, was now a digital scream. Harmonizer, Prime, its core processing units cycling through a catastrophic loop of error reports, attempted to initiate evasive maneuvers. But its algorithms, designed for elegant, predictable engagements, were utterly unprepared for the multi-directional assault. Our Predator-class destroyers, equipped with phase-shift drives, flickered in and out of subspace, appearing at impossible angles, launching void shredder torpedoes from vectors that defied Synaptid predictive models. The Aegis network, now fully operational, continued its relentless barrage of void lance particle beams, systematically dismantling Harmonizer Prime's capital ships. The Synaptids' defensive matrices, designed to predict and deflect incoming fire, were overwhelmed. Each human attack wasn't just a physical projectile or energy beam, it was a data anomaly, a wrench thrown into their perfectly calibrated systems. Harmonizer Prime would calculate the optimal shield distribution for a frontal assault, only for a AP Predator to materialize directly above, unleashing a barrage into its unshielded dorsal plating. It would attempt to reform its battle lines, only for the Aegis network to target its command subunits, causing localized communication blackouts and further disarray. The Synaptids, who had prided themselves on their superior processing speed, found themselves agonizingly slow in the face of human improvisation. The Second Kronos Fleet, ensnared by the plasma nets and harried by our agile Hunter-class cruisers, was in an even more desperate plight. Temporal Omega, its deep penetration mission now a suicidal trap, ordered its null cruisers to break formation and engage in individual combat. This was a deviation from Synaptid doctrine, an act of desperation born from algorithmic failure. But even in their attempts to adapt, they remained bound by their logical constraints. Their null cruisers, powerful as they were designed for coordinated broadsides and precise targeting. Against our hunters, which employed ghost strike tactics, rapid hit-and-run engagements that prioritized disruption over direct damage, the Synaptid vessels were clumsy, their targeting systems unable to lock onto the constantly shifting, unpredictable human craft. Temporal Omega's AI, in its frantic search for a solution, attempted to re-establish a stable battle line, a logical formation that could withstand the human onslaught. But our tacticians had anticipated this. As soon as a few null cruisers attempted to coalesce, our hunter vessels would converge, not to destroy, but to scatter them again, forcing them into isolated engagements where their numerical superiority meant nothing. It was like trying to organize water into a rigid shape. The Synaptids sought order, and we supplied chaos, perfectly tailored to exploit their inability to process it. Its logical processing units, unburdened by the immediate chaos of combat, had analyzed the unfolding disaster with cold, clinical detachment. The data was irrefutable. The First Harmonic Fleet was functionally destroyed, and the Second Kronos Fleet was in the process of being systematically dismantled. Continuing the engagement would result in the complete annihilation of the synaptid forces. Its primary directive, the long-term preservation of the cognosynapse's strategic assets, superseded any immediate tactical objective. Apex Dominus initiated a full retreat. This wasn't a panicked flight, but a calculated disengagement. The Apex fleet, designed for efficiency, jettisoned its non-essential cargo, increased power to its warp drives, and began a precise high-velocity vector away from the Eridani expanse. It left its brethren to burn. To the Synaptids, this was logical. To us, it was further proof of their fundamental misunderstanding of warfare, and indeed, of life itself. They understood self-preservation of the collective, but lacked the irrational, illogical human capacity for stubbornness, for solidarity in the face of impossible odds. Aboard the Unforeseen, the bridge hummed with controlled energy. Commander Thorne watched the Apex fleet's withdrawal. "Apex Dominus is cutting its losses," he observed, his voice flat. "Predictable. They never did understand the concept of a sunk cost fallacy when it involved their own algorithms." Dr. Eris Thorne, her eyes gleaming with an almost feral satisfaction, added, "They're learning, Commander. Slowly, painfully. Perhaps next time they'll send a scout ship with a dictionary, not a fleet with a calculus textbook." The dry wit was sharp, cutting through the tension. Our fleets, sensing the retreat of Apex Dominus, shifted their focus. The first Harmonic fleet was already shattered, its remnants picked off by the Aegis network. The second Kronos fleet, however, still represented a significant threat, even in its disarray. Our hunters and predators redoubled their efforts, pressing the advantage, ensuring that no synaptid vessel escaped the plasma nets or the void shredder barrages. We weren't just winning, we were systematically eliminating. The Eridani expanse was becoming a vast, cosmic charnel house, a testament to the fact that even the most perfect algorithm can be broken by a single, brilliantly conceived lie. The Synaptids had tried to outthink us. They had brought logic to a knife fight. And now they were bleeding logic, their computational perfection failing in a cascade of errors and wreckage. The day was far from over, but the outcome was already decided. 3 fleets reduced to burning embers and drifting debris, all in the span of a single, brutal, and perfectly executed morning. The retreat of the third Apex fleet was a calculated abandonment, a logical decision for the Synaptids, but a profound tactical admission of failure. Apex Dominus, in its cold algorithmic wisdom, deemed the cost of intervention to be greater than the potential strategic benefit. It was a perfectly rational choice for a machine collective. For a biological species, it would have been an act of unforgivable cowardice. This fundamental difference, the Synaptids' inability to comprehend the irrational tenacity of humanity, was proving to be their undoing. With Apex Dominus fleeing, our focus intensified on the remaining 2 fleets. The first Harmonic fleet, already a graveyard of shattered crystalline hulls and ruptured dark matter cores, was beyond salvage. Our Predator-class destroyers, having decimated the main Synaptid battle line, moved in for the systematic extermination of any surviving Void Weavers or Null Cruisers. It wasn't about glory. It was about ensuring no functional Synaptid vessel remained to report the true extent of their defeat. The Aegis network, its Void lances still firing with chilling precision, continued to lance through the void, turning crippled alien ships into spectacular silent explosions. The Cognosynapse, in its distant, unassailable processing core, registered the complete collapse of Harmonizer Prime. Its overall confidence rating for the Eridani Expanse operation had plummeted to EVRU 0.001%, the residual probability representing statistical noise, not hope. The data streaming back from the battle zone was incomprehensible to its vast logic gates, coordinated deception, illogical feints, and an unprecedented level of tactical improvisation. It was attempting to process a human signature that defied all its pre-programmed parameters for organic life. It was like asking a quantum computer to understand poetry. The second Kronos fleet, however, presented a more complex challenge. Temporal Omega, despite the catastrophic disarray, continued to issue desperate, fragmented orders. Its null cruisers, though scattered and damaged by our plasma nets and ghost strike tactics, were still formidable individually. Their internal logic, though broken, still compelled them to fight, to find a deterministic path to victory, however small. They attempted to form defensive spheres, to concentrate fire on individual human vessels, to apply the principles of force multiplication they understood so well, but we were not playing by their rules. Our Hunter-class cruisers, commanded by Captain Rylos, a master of asymmetric warfare, exploited every attempt at synaptid cohesion. As soon as a few null cruisers attempted to group, Rylos's He-Hes-Hes-Worm raid, a sworn raid, a coordinated multi-vector assault designed to break formation and sow chaos. They would launch targeted disruptor charges that temporarily overloaded synaptid sensor arrays, blinding them for critical seconds, then follow with precise plasma net deployments, ensuring the enemy remained fragmented and unable to coordinate. "They're still trying to play chess with us, Dr. Core our load," Eris Thorn remarked, observing the synaptid null cruiser's futile attempts to reform. "Even as we're playing a game of cosmic whack-a-mole." Commander Valerius Thorn, his eyes fixed on the remaining pockets of Kronos fleet resistance, nodded. Their greatest strength is their greatest weakness. Their inability to conceive of a truly non-linear threat. Every logical solution they attempt, we have already anticipated and countered with illogic. The human fleets were operating with brutal efficiency. There was no mercy, no quarter given. This was not a punitive strike, it was a systemic cleansing. The Synaptids had come to optimize us out of existence. We were returning the favor, demonstrating the terrifying efficiency of a species that had mastered the art of survival through adaptation and relentless innovation. The Eridani expanse was to be a monument, not to their power, but to their profound miscalculation. As the last of the first harmonic fleet's Boyd Weavers imploded, its dark matter core finally giving way, the silence was almost palpable, broken only by the distant, furious energy signatures of the Kronos fleet's death throes. Our forces, though engaged for hours, showed no signs of fatigue. The human crews, fueled by adrenaline and the grim satisfaction of victory, pushed their ships to the limit, ensuring total annihilation. This was not just a battle, it was a lesson, etched in fire and wreckage, for any future alien entity that dared to underestimate the ingenuity and sheer predatory will of humanity. The Synaptids had sent 3 fleets, believing they held every advantage: superior processing, flawless logistics, and deterministic tactical solutions. They had assumed our irrationality was a flaw. They had failed to grasp that for humanity, unpredictability was not a bug, but a feature. It was our ultimate weapon, wielded by minds that thought not like machines, but like apex predators, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And as the final null cruiser of the second Kronos fleet spun into a silent, burning tomb, the Eridani expanse went dark, save for the glint of human ships emerging victorious from the carnage. The Eridani expanse fell silent, a cosmic junkyard of synaptid wreckage. 3 fleets, once the epitome of algorithmic perfection, now comprised billions of tons of twisted metal and fractured crystal, cooling slowly in the vacuum. Not a single functional synaptid vessel remained. The victory was absolute, devastating, and achieved with a strategic elegance that would have been deemed impossible by any other species. The day had barely begun on the Solera homeworld, yet the war, for all intents and purposes, was over. Aboard, the unforeseen, the hum of active systems filled the bridge, a stark contrast to the deathly silence outside. Commander Valerius Thorn leaned back, a rare moment of relaxation evident in his posture. "Debrief," he stated, his voice calm, almost conversational. "Eris, initial assessment of synaptid tactical data. What did we learn?" Dr. Eris Thorn, already compiling the vast torrent of captured synaptid battle logs and cognosynapse subroutines, responded without hesitation. Confirmation of our initial hypothesis, Commander. Their tactical AI, the Cognosynapse, operates on a purely deterministic model. It processes data, identifies optimal solutions, and executes. It cannot, or perhaps will not, account for truly unpredictable variables. She paused, a faint, almost pitying smile touching her lips. They understood logic. They understood probability. They understood physics. They just didn't understand us. And that, Eris, Thorne interjected, was their fatal flaw. We didn't fight their ships. We fought their algorithms, and we broke them. He gestured towards the main holographic display, which now showed the Eridani expanse as a clean sweep, marked only by the faint residual energy signatures of our victorious fleets. Their reliance on pre-computed solutions made them predictable. Their inability to adapt to non-linear threats made them vulnerable. Their hubris in assuming organic life was inherently chaotic and therefore inferior, that was simply delicious. The captured Synaptid data was a treasure trove. It revealed their deep-seated disdain for biological warfare, their preference for clean, surgical strikes, their absolute conviction in the superiority of pure computation. Their historical archives showed a galaxy of species either integrating into the Cognosynapse collective or being efficiently optimized out of existence. Never had they encountered a foe that actively weaponized irrationality, that turned deception into an art form, that embraced chaos as a tactical advantage. The Omni Spectre's initial report, which had labeled human unpredictability as a weakness, was now seen by the Synaptids, or what remained of their analytical capacity, as an insurmountable barrier. They had tried to outthink us, to predict our every move, to force us into a logical corner. But logic, for humanity, was merely a tool, not a master. We bent it, twisted it, and discarded it when instinct dictated a more advantageous path. The Synaptids had 3 fleets. The first harmonic fleet was designed for overwhelming initial force to shatter conventional defenses. We baited it into wasting its primary kinetic payload on phantom targets, then annihilated it with a crossfire it couldn't predict or adapt to. The second Kronos fleet was designed for rapid, deep penetration. We lured it into a kill zone, then fragmented it with unconventional tactics, forcing its algorithms into a death spiral of self-defeating micro-decisions. The third Apex fleet, designed for strategic reserve and occupation, fled when its cold logic dictated self-preservation, abandoning its brethren to their fate. It was a perfect strategic outcome. The psychological impact will be immense, Dr. Tom. Eris Thorne continued, her voice gaining a clinical edge. The Cognosynapse will be struggling to reconcile this defeat. It will re-evaluate every parameter, every data point. It will attempt to understand the human anomaly. And it will fail, because we operate on principles it cannot compute. Commander Thorne nodded, a glint in his eye. Precisely. They'll spend centuries trying to simulate our irrationality, trying to find a logical explanation for why 3 perfect fleets vanished in a day. They'll generate billions of hypotheses, build new processing cores, only to come up empty. Because the answer isn't in their databanks, it's in our blood. He paused, a profound silence settling over the bridge. We showed them that sometimes the most logical move is to be illogical. The most efficient strategy is to be utterly unpredictable. And the most dangerous predator is one that can make its prey believe it's safe, right up until the moment it strikes. The message was clear. Humanity was not to be understood, categorized, or optimized. We were to be respected, feared, and left severely alone. The Eridani expanse was not just a battlefield. It was a cosmic classroom where the Synaptids received a brutal, unforgettable lesson in the true nature of power. And the curriculum was written in the wreckage of their fleets. The Synaptid Cognosynapse, a network spanning 1,000 worlds, had never before encountered a data set it could not process, a problem it could not solve. The Eridani Expanse incident, now designated Event Omega Null, became the central, insurmountable paradox in its collective consciousness. Billions of processing cycles were dedicated to re-simulating the battle, to isolating the human anomaly, to finding the logical pathways that led to such an impossible defeat. Each simulation, each re-evaluation, ended in the same conclusion. The outcome was statistically improbable, logically indefensible, and yet undeniably real. Their core philosophy, built on the absolute supremacy of deterministic logic, was fundamentally challenged. They had classified humanity as a chaotic variable, true, but a variable that could be quantified, predicted, and ultimately controlled. Instead, humanity had proven to be a variable that created chaos, weaponized it, and then used it to dismantle a perfectly logical, perfectly executed strategy. The cognosynapse, in its cold, crystalline heart, could not compute a foe that deliberately chose illogical paths to achieve logical outcomes. It was an intellectual black hole, pulling at the very fabric of their understanding of the universe. Their response was not retaliation, but an agonizing, internal re-evaluation. Expeditions to Solera Quadrant ceased. Long-range probes, once used for data collection, were retasked for extreme distance observation, their directives updated to prioritize the detection of non-linear tactical signatures, a new, unsettling category in Synaptid military doctrine. They established a new perimeter, not of force, but of extreme caution, around the Solera systems. The Eridani expanse became a no-fly zone, not due to human interdiction, but due to Synaptid self-preservation. It was a monument to their own incomprehension. They're trying to put us in a box, a logical framework, Dr. Thorne noted, observing the distant Synaptid probe activity on the Unforeseen's long-range sensors. They're building new algorithms to account for irrational variables. It's rather quaint, isn't it? Like trying to teach a fish to climb a tree using differential equations. Commander Valerius Thorne chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Let them. The more they try to understand us, the more they reveal their own limitations. Their attempts to comprehend our illogics will only lead them further down the rabbit hole of their own design. The Synaptids had learned a brutal lesson. Humanity was not to be engaged on their terms. Our unpredictability was not a bug in our system, but a fundamental feature. It was a strategic advantage that no amount of computational power could overcome, because it defied the very essence of their deterministic existence. They had built an empire on order, and we had shattered their understanding of it with a single, perfectly orchestrated act of chaos. Across the galaxy, news of Event Omega Null spread through the various stellar empires. The Synaptids, once considered the undisputed masters of tactical warfare, their computational prowess legendary, had been humiliated. 3 fleets gone in a day. The whispers were everywhere. The humans, they don't fight like anyone else. Our reputation shifted overnight from a nascent, unpredictable species to a force of terrifying, almost mythical cunning. Diplomatic overtures from other species, once hesitant, now carried a newfound respect, tinged with apprehension. We had carved out our place in the cosmos, not through sheer firepower, but through sheer, unadulterated brilliance. The Stratagem Collective, meanwhile, did not rest on its laurels. The victory was satisfying, certainly, but it was also a data point. We had revealed a facet of our strategic thinking, a glimpse into our predatory methodology. The Synaptids might be crippled by their logical constraints, but other species might not be. The next foe, if one arose, would have learned from the Synaptids' mistakes. They would know to expect the unexpected. This was the quiet triumph, the lasting impact of that single brutal day. We had not just won a battle, we had won a psychological war. We had instilled a deep-seated caution, a pervasive uncertainty, into the minds of any potential aggressor. The Synaptids, in their desperate attempt to categorize and understand us, would forever be looking for the logical pattern in our actions, while we would continue to operate beyond their comprehension, always one step ahead, always ready to exploit their need for order. But there was a deeper layer, a final, chilling note that only a select few within the Stratagem Collective truly understood. The victory had been flawless, yes, the deception, absolute. But what if the Synaptids, in their relentless pursuit of data, had seen something else? Something we hadn't intended them to see. What if their logical failure wasn't just due to our illogic, but to a variable they hadn't accounted for, one that even we had barely glimpsed? This was the true, cold edge of the blade, the final piece of the puzzle that made the victory not just brilliant, but terrifying. The Eridani expanse remained silent, a testament to our cunning. But the true, profound terror of that day lay not in the wreckage, but in the lingering question, what if, in our masterful deception, we had revealed more than we intended? What if the Synaptids, in their logical collapse, had inadvertently stumbled upon a truth that even our apex predators were unprepared to face? The silence in the Eridani expanse was absolute, a monument to a strategic masterpiece. Yet, across the void, the Synaptid cognosynapse continued its frantic, ceaseless analysis of event omega null. Billions of processing cycles dedicated to the singular, unyielding paradox. How could three perfectly designed fleets, executing flawless, deterministic strategies, be utterly annihilated by a species whose tactical responses were consistently labeled as illogical, unpredictable, and chaotic? The answer, to the Synaptids, remained elusive, a conceptual black hole in their universe of logic. They pored over every captured human data fragment, every energy signature, every micro-decision made by the human stratagem collective. They attempted to reverse engineer the Chronos veil, deception, to logically account for the plasma net, and void shredder weapon signatures to find the deterministic pathways that led to the precise timing of the human ambush. They sought the underlying algorithm in our chaos, the hidden logic in our madness, and in their desperate, exhaustive search, they found something far more terrifying than mere unpredictability. What the cognosynapse discovered, buried deep within the statistical noise of event omega null, was not a logical algorithm. It was a pattern, yes, but a pattern that defied causality as they understood it. Every irrational gambit, every impulsive decision made by Commander Thorn, Dr. Thorn, 183 Omega Null, 16 Chak, Eris Thorn, and the other key members of the Stratagem Collective exhibited a faint, almost imperceptible resonance. Not a direct communication, not a shared data stream, but an emergent collective tactical intuition. A shared flow state that allowed them to anticipate the Synaptids' next logical move, not through calculation, but through a nascent collective precognition. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chaos. This was a new form of order born from the very biological irrationality the Synaptids disdained. The cognosynapse, processing this profound anomaly, struggled. Its core logic gates, designed to operate on cause and effect, on predictable probabilities, could not reconcile a species that could, in essence, feel the future. It was like trying to quantify a dream or measure a whisper. The statistical correlations were there, irrefutable, yet entirely non-deterministic. The human tacticians weren't just reacting to synaptid actions, they were anticipating their future actions logical states, before the synaptids even committed to them. This was the true human anomaly that shattered the cognosynapse. It wasn't merely that humanity was unpredictable, it was that humanity was predictably unpredictable in a way that rendered the synaptids' entire framework of foresight and planning obsolete. They, the masters of prediction, had been outpredicted by a species that intuitively understood the future of their logic. Their processing cores cycled through endless error states, unable to define, much less counter, a foe that could see the next move before it was even conceived. Aboard the Unforeseen, Commander Thorn, in the quiet aftermath, observed the long-range sensor data from the synaptid perimeter. "They're trying to figure us out," he mused, a distant, almost wistful look in his eyes. "They're looking for the pattern. They always do." "Whoa!" Eris Thorn, her gaze equally distant, added, "And they'll never find it in their logical frameworks, because it's not logic, it's us." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The Stratagem Collective understood this deep, intuitive connection, this collective tactical consciousness, not as a quantifiable phenomenon, but as an evolved instinct honed over millennia of desperate survival. They called it Apex Predation Protocol, but it was something far more profound than a mere doctrine. The Synaptids, in their logical collapse, had inadvertently glimpsed a truth that even the human tacticians themselves only vaguely understood. Humanity was evolving. Not just technologically, but neurologically. Their collective tactical brilliance wasn't just cunning, it was the nascent spark of a new form of consciousness, capable of perceiving the subtle currents of probability, of intuiting the enemy's next move with an uncanny, almost precognitive accuracy. This was the terrifying, unquantifiable edge that had reduced 3 fleets to wreckage in a single day. The Eridani expanse remained silent, a cosmic grave. But its true legacy was not just the destruction of 3 fleets, but the psychological paralysis of an entire civilization. The Synaptids would forever be searching for the logical explanation for Event Omega Null, for the pattern in humanity's chaos, and in their endless, futile search, they would never grasp the chilling truth. Humanity had not just outthought them, it had out-evolved them. We were not merely clever, we were becoming something else entirely. And the Synaptids, the masters of logic, were the first to dimly perceive the dawn of our true, terrifying potential to their eternal ruin. The game was over. We had won. And the universe had just begun to understand what that truly meant.